He's never fought us. Not us united.
My favorite moment in the entire... Maybe I should complicate this before I start speaking here.
Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and I'm here with Dawson. What's up, dude?
How's it going, man? It's good to be here.
Making his grand return to Comics League after an extended break or writing and drawing comics.
Yeah,
and beating Zack Snyder.
Yeah, last I was on here, I think we were talking about independent comic books, and I think we had I forget his name. I know he came out with a comic book recently.
Nick from the Phoenix Press, and then we had Max MVP, and then my other co-host Lad.
Right. And that was a good stream. But yeah, like you said, ever since then, a lot of stuff's happened.
That's an understatement. So for those that don't know, Dawson apparently won an art contest for Rebel Moon where he got to go meet Zack Snyder. So I was like super jealous.
Yeah, that's where I got the shirt. Netflix gave me this like water bottle and everything, and I just can't wait to where I'm actually able to talk about the set visit. You know,
because I saw that teaser, and that teaser looks freaking dope.
Oh yeah, the movie's gonna blow people away. I'm really excited for what people think about it, and
it's because I've long said Snyder needs to do a Star Wars like project, and apparently, from what I'm seeing, is that it's working really well.
Yeah, I'll say I'm just super stoked for it. I'm super stoked for people to see some of the things that I saw, and I'm just excited for when I can actually put out the footage and photos that I took on set and like put out an actual like behind the scenes video when I'm allowed to. Just because it was such an amazing thing to witness, like without going too far into it, because I know that Netflix will probably be watching my remove about it, but it was really cool.
So the reason I wanted to have him on is because for those of you that have been watching this channel for a while, I've been reviewing Savage for like a long time. And Savage issue 3 comes out when?
On February 11th.
So I wanted to have him on, talk about the book, get a little behind the scenes perspective on Savage. So Dawson, let me ask you this. Where'd the idea for this book come from?
So my dad actually, back in like 2006, I think, he was, working the oil field and going out and repairing pipelines and such. And he was by himself a lot. So he was able to think about stories he really wanted to see. And my dad grew up a lot of his childhood in South Dakota, which of course a lot of people know. South Dakota is a very rich Native American history. And there's just a lot of Native American activity that happened there. Lewis and Clark went through there. You had the Sioux Indians. You had the Crow, I believe. There's a lot of different tribes that went through there. And of course, the Buffalo. There's just a lot of history surrounding that. And my dad got to thinking a lot about that one day. And he wrote a movie script, actually. And it was called Savage. And he had this whole idea of this story of a young man whose life is turned upside down, basically what you see in the comic book so far. And that script sat on his computer for a solid, I want to say like 12 years, like a long time, or I think about 18, 19 years. And he had submitted it to like different, movie scripts, contests and whatnot. And my dad doesn't know anybody in the industry. So people were like, who are you? Whatever, throw this out. And so it just was something that was in the back of his mind for a long time. And I can't remember if it was my older brother or my dad who suggested to me when I started getting to, the comic style of art. 'Cause I've always been an artist, but getting into comic style was more like the past 5 years. And they saw that I was doing these things and they thought, what'd be really cool is if Savage was a comic. And I kind of just took that idea and ran with it. I ran with it. I started working on it. And fun story about Savage Volume 1. I know you have a copy right there. I started working on that about a year before I got married. And we were preparing for the wedding and everything. And I wanted to surprise my dad by getting the comic finished and getting it published on Amazon and getting a copy to give it to him the day before I got married. So for a whole year, I would stay up until like 3 a.m. working on a comic book after a long day of work. And I worked on it. I made sure to get all like the dimensions ready. And like, you know, when you make a comic book, there's a lot of other things people don't think about, right? You got to make sure you can print the right size, that the optimization is good for the image quality and everything. There's a lot of stuff a lot of people don't think about when it comes to making a comic. Anyway, I had to figure all that out in secret because I didn't want my dad to know what I was doing. And so we had this whole get together the day before my wife and I's wedding. And like my side of the family was there, my wife's side of the family was there, and they kind of asked my wife and I to go up and say some words. And I pulled out like a little envelope and I said the whole spiel. And I gave my dad the first ever issue of Savage Volume 1. One of the few times my dad's like, he's a loving dad, but he's also a tough guy. One of the few times I've ever seen him cry in my life.
Wow.
Was at that moment. So it's a very, very personal family project that my dad had in his mind for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I detected that this project has been in the works for a while. As soon as I saw the Motorola Razr flip phone, I was like, oh, okay, I see what you did. I recognized it immediately as a Razr. I was like, oh, nice job.
Well, yeah, I mean, because when he wrote it was about 2006 and 2007, and the Motorola Razr, I mean, you remember, was the phone that everybody had, you know, everybody loved that. And that was actually one of the funnest things I ever got to draw.
Well rendered, by the way. Just want to say that. Just tease.
It was super fun because I remember when they first came out, like every other classmate of mine had a Razr, and so drawing that was just a big nostalgia trip.
Yeah, my mom had one. Every time I see this, I was like, man, there was a time when that was considered advanced technology.
Wow. Oh, what a few years difference makes.
Oh yes, oh yes. So again, yeah, the book is great, and one of the things I like the most about it is the way you sort of start to like sprinkle in a lot of this stuff. It's like how the first book is entirely in the Native American times. The second one is entirely in the modern times. So I like how you kind of sprinkle in these little ideas as the story goes on. Yeah,
and that's really fun part about it because my dad actually started writing the script in like the middle of the story, which we haven't really gotten to yet. But then he got to the beginning and started writing that out. And we talked a lot back and forth about how to present the story of Blue Raven, right? The Native American in this situation, the warrior. And it was really cool because he let me have a lot of creative freedom with it. In fact, there's a sequence in volume 3 near the end of the book where I got to it in the script and I was like, this needs something. And so I talked to my dad about it and I was like, I kind of had this idea about how to represent this in sort of a more abstract and psychological way. And my dad's like, go for it. I love the idea. Go for it. So although it is really based on the script my dad had, there are other changes we've made since that script has been done, right? As we go along, we see, oh, this would actually work better. This would be more interesting to look at as far as art is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And by the way, the way you draw blood in this and like the violence and the gore. Yeah. Immediately when I read this, I was like, yeah, he works for me. Just saying that works.
Yeah. I love doing it. I mean, obviously I'm not one of those people that watches like torture porn or like slasher films or anything, but like if you have action in a film or violence, to me, it doesn't resonate unless there is at least some blood, right? That shows it's realistic, that's hard hitting, and that actually causes the character pain. You know, like for instance, the John Wick films, you see John Wick bleeding all the time, and it shows you he's going through the ringer, right? It actually convinces
or Logan.
You. Yeah, Logan, exactly. It convinces you that they're actually going through something difficult rather than just being like hit in the face and no bruises or cuts or anything happen. It's like, oh, there's no stakes anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's like, that's my biggest problem with like when they made like the Venom movies, PG-13. I'm like, if there's one character that needs a rated R movie, it's Venom.
It's Venom, especially when you introduce Carnage, a serial killer with a symbiote. I mean, come on.
Exactly. I mean, they kind of had blood in like the IV tubes, but that's about it. I was like, what the hell? What are you doing here?
They're like, we needed more blood, so here's an IV tube. No. That's not what we're talking about.
No. Well, that's just Sony. So, of
course, yeah.
But another thing that I really like about the book is the way you write Adam in like the modern times, because you write him as like your typical teenager going through the typical teenage stuff, and then all of a sudden he's like you said before, plopped on. Oh yeah, you're also this. It's like, wow.
It's a really fun dichotomy because, you know, you have Adam Gaines, the main character, the high school football player, and he's basically just a really good kid. You know, he's just a really mild mannered, very respectful, very humble, but also just very talented. He's kind of living the dream, honestly, as a teenager in high school, and he's got all these things going for him. And then on the flip side, you have Blue Raven, right? Blue Raven's very arrogant. He's very self-centered. He's very prideful and driven, and he's very much inclined to violence and getting what he wants through any means necessary. And so you have these two conflicting personalities that are fighting for control, which is just so interesting to play with, honestly. Whenever you have a character like that struggles within themselves with multiple different things going on, it always creates something that's more interesting to read, at least for me personally.
It sounds to me like it's very Moon Knight-ish, how he has all these different personalities inside himself kind of vying for control.
Similar vibe, but a different approach, right? Because Moon Knight obviously is more like psychological. He's got split personality disorder and a lot of the things. This leans more to the mystical side of things rather than like mental, you know? So it's not like there's necessarily something wrong with Adam. In fact, I would characterize Adam as a victim in the story.
Oh, yeah.
Because all this stuff is outside of his control, and he's just kind of having to work around it and live with it and with the consequences that come with it.
So let me ask you this: in terms of like the art, are there any particular like artists that like inspired you to like draw certain things? Like, okay, I'll do it this way because I saw this artist do it.
It's kind of adapted as I've gone along, because you see between issue or volume 1 and 2, the art style kind of changes a little bit, and I think that's kind of fun just because, you know, as I adapt as an artist and as I grow, my art changes with me, right? And so you kind of see that from volume 1 to volume 2. You see another leap in volume 3 in difference. As far as volume 3 is concerned, I lean more into a lot of what Jim Lee does with his art. I mean, that's obviously a person that a lot of people try to emulate with the comic book style. But facial structures, the way that characters express themselves and their faces, and the way that shading is done. And I think that's definitely been a huge inspiration for me. And of course, obviously people like Jason Fabok, a little bit of Greg Capullo in there. I definitely don't go as,
of course,
I definitely don't go as like slightly cartoonish as Greg Capullo does, even though Greg Capullo is my favorite artist of all time. But I use some things in there to kind of pay that homage, but not go as far as like, say, the way that he draws everything, you know? So definitely a lot of great artists that I look up to that very much inspire the art of this book.
In terms of like, I was about to say, in terms of violence, I definitely see the Capullo like inspiration in there, because he draws a lot of that brutal action that that's gonna love with his Spawn or even his Batman.
Yeah, you mentioned the blood. The way that I've drawn blood in this book is very much derived from a combination of Greg Capullo and John Romita Jr. Because John Romita Jr., how he does blood is he does like an outline of an area and no other ink marks, and just kind of puts red there. And so it distances itself from everything else in the image. And I think using that a little bit, as well as adding shading to the blood, is definitely something I'm trying to utilize more and more with this book.
Are there any particular like superheroes that like inspired the way you draw, the way you depict Adam?
I think with Adam, it's a little bit different, because with a lot of the superheroes like Batman or Superman, you know, they're Caucasian characters, right? For the most part. With Adam, he's Native American. So, of course, you have to change some facial structure to make sure that you kind of represent that in a way that it conveys that, yes, he is indeed Native American. And also the fact that he has very long hair. That's definitely something different from what I usually do. Just because other superheroes you see with like shorter, kind of wavy hair. With Batman, if he's taken off his cowl, it's a little bit messy, right? Where it's still shorter. Very few comic characters besides, you know, Thor, right, that you see.
And now Aquaman.
Yeah, now Aquaman, right, with longer hair. So I've taken some things with how I draw, like muscle structure, for instance. I definitely take a lot of what I would do with Batman with that, but I scale it down just because, you know, he's a teenager, right? But it's a combination of things for sure. I think as far as the face is concerned, I'm looking at one of my pages for volume 3 now. I definitely use a little bit of Superman as far as the cheek structure. But other than that, I try to differentiate a little bit from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see that. It's really, really dope. But so now let me ask you this: where do you see this series going in the future? Like maybe, if it's possible, animated movies or anything like that.
Well,
Just
that'd
say,
obviously be amazing if we got a deal like that. Like, I'd take that deal right now. But the short-term vision for it is obviously fleshing out the series to finish the script of the film, because my dad wrote a script for a first and second film.
wow.
So I think he has the second film script like mostly done. He had started writing that when he finished Savage 1 because he had more ideas planned. So we want to flesh out the story for what would have been the first film. And eventually I want to compile it into a hardcover omnibus.
Of course.
And maybe remaster some of the first issues a little bit, like maybe the first volume I'd remaster just a slight little bit. But definitely want to do that. And then if by that time demand is very high for more Savage, we would want to delve more into that Savage story, right? Because there's so many directions you could go with this story and with these characters.
Plus, honestly, you could also do in the style of Project Justice League, because that thing is practically animated and that thing is fantastic. So
true. I mean, it'd be a very big undertaking for sure. And I think that'd be really cool if we could do that. I don't know. That's definitely an interesting idea. That's something I definitely could explore once we get to the point where the story's fleshed out in comic form, but who knows?
by the way, if anyone who saw Project Justice League thinks Dawson's voice is familiar, you want to tell everyone who you played in that film?
A very small role. I was the Flash. Just a couple moments of dialogue. And yes, if you guys haven't checked out Project Justice League, check it out on the Flash Network.
Please do, because that thing is fantastic. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, we're approaching 100,000 views on the project, and we just reached over $6,000 in donations for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which is the main reason we did this, was to raise money for that cause. So if you can take the time, definitely go and check it out. And if you have the means, donate to a great cause. We'd appreciate it.
Heck yeah. Because what you guys essentially did is, it's like that Thanos clip, which I need to get for the show. It's the final do it myself thing. So it's like, because let me put it this way, after watching that, I'm like, okay, if it happens, it happens. But if it doesn't, I got this. So what I could just do is watch Man of Steel up to this now, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, I mean, Andre definitely had that in mind. You know, he thought, well, if it's not going to be restored or anything, let's do something with this. And so Andre was the mastermind of the project. Ryan Zierfett was the art of the project, along with the animators and everything. And also I think Mariano did the coloring and everything. So a lot of
now the background for my iPad. Just saying. Wait, hang on.
Oh, nice. Yes. That's the money shot right there. But huge props.
Okay. I'd love to see this in live action, but it just looks so badass.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, huge props to all those who made it possible, and for Andre for making it to a 4Nerds production, because there's just so many people involved. We wanted to get it as spread out as possible, and again, huge props to them. They rocked it, honestly.
Yeah. And I saw like the people who were involved in this project. I was like, Liz Wonder. I was like, oh, what? Oh, well, of course, if she was going to be involved, she was going to play Wonder Woman. It's like there's absolutely no doubt there.
Yeah, we had a huge group involved, which is really cool.
Yeah. But to that point, what you could probably do is that when this is done after the omnibus, is do like a motion comic idea with like voice actors and such, bring them in and do that.
Yeah, I mean, that could be really cool. I mean, even if we could even possibly use like art from the book, because I have everything saved digitally. That could be something we could entertain, or at least use it as reference, right? So I'd be open to that. Definitely would be. That's something to consider for sure.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's actually good that you're considering doing like a graphic novel length or an omnibus length as soon as this is done, because graphic novels are really big, and I feel like they may take over the main like comic book industry as like the primary way people get their comics, really, because it's like you get a complete story then.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, especially if you're just interested in storytelling, right? If you're not necessarily
Mhm.
interested in like collecting or, getting artist variant covers, like we are very much so about that. But you're definitely seeing that trend of people just liking to see that more whole story. In fact, that's why for the next personal project I'll be doing after, of course, our project we'll be doing together, I'm be doing a graphic novel, not single issue story. And the graphic novel is called Glitch. I had the script written out. It's gonna hopefully be around, oh gosh, I don't even know. It's probably around 200 pages, something like that.
Whoa.
It's gonna be a big story, maybe. Just kind of depends on what we do with the script, but I'm very excited about the possibility. So who knows? I mean, I like the idea of compiling things together. It makes it easier to read, and I think it's easier for like people to get invested in a news story if it's just all in one place, right?
That's why I'm going for our thing. That's why I ultimately decided just do as a graphic novel, as a couple of graphic novels. That way, people can have the full story. They can have a better idea of where the story is going. If there's ever like slow points, so I'm like, just go with it like that. That's the best option here.
Yeah, not a bad way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And so back to Savage, but the other reason why I got this is because I wanted to see, because again, if I have a better idea on your art style, it's easier for me to like compile the script and stuff. So when I saw this, I mean, first off, the dark quality of the art is like 100% what I was going for, because it's like, because once again, because I didn't want anyone, because again, so for those that don't know, Dawson and I are doing a superhero story together, and I didn't want it to be like too cartoony, i.e., the movie that must not be named. So I really wanted to like a more mature, more dark tone for this, because the story is going to be not like BVS dark, but still dark. So I'm a big believer that the art style has to reflect that. So when I read this, even issue 1, it definitely like works out the way you draw shadows, the way you draw, again, combat and blood, 100% works out really well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's really exciting, because I absolutely agree with you when you say that when you're doing a graphic novel or comic, you have to have the right combination of writer and artist, right? It has to flow together. The writing style has to match. And sometimes you see those stories where the writing's either really good, but the art's like a little campy or cartoonish for what's being represented in the story, or you have the opposite effect where the art's just amazing and the story that's written is just kind of just meh. A good example of that is All-Star Batman and Robin with Jim Lee and Frank Miller. That's easily Frank Miller's worst writing, and yet Jim Lee's art is just amazing, so it doesn't really blend very well. You're absolutely right. You have to have the right combination. I'm glad that you think that it's going to work.
The two artist writer combinations that I think were like some of the best in comics was actually Jeff Johns and Jim Lee for Justice League Origin from the New 52, and then speaking of Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo for Batman, because oh my gosh, because when you're watching that, because here's the thing, Scott Snyder is the writer that I really call, like, him and Donny Cates, the oh my gosh, that's so awesome writer. Like they'll like do stuff just because it looks cool. And when you have like a writer like Greg Capullo, or in Donny's Cates like Ryan Stegman, you need a writer that I could properly say, make you go like, oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that, like Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, right? They recently released a book through Comixology as well as Dark Horse Comics called We Have Demons. In fact, I have the first issue of that signed by Scott Snyder right up there, right?
Of course you do.
Of course, yeah, I had to. But again, in that story, it's the same thing. The art and the writing flows together, and it matches what they're trying to do. And when that happens, it's a beautiful thing. That's what makes it to where that book is one that you really cherish,
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you, because the one thing I will say, going to All-Star Batman and Robin, whenever I talk about that book with people, they'll say, it's bonkers, but man, that's Jim Lee art. Because that was Jim Lee at his prime.
Yes, I mean, the art for that book makes it tolerable. Again, easily Frank Miller's worst and most odd writing ever. Although I will say, if Frank Miller did the art himself, I think it would have been slightly better received, but not much. It would have been more like, yeah, it's Frank Miller.
That 6-page fold out, that's the Batcave. I'm like, Okay, now this is just you flexing, Jim. Jeez.
I have a special edition of the first issue where it's just the pencil sketches of Jim Lee along with the dialogue and everything, and it's beautiful. I'd have to dig that up and see if I can find it, but it's absolutely beautiful. But
I want to see if I can get that. I want to see if I can get that fold out as like a poster, because that would be so dope. Jim Lee's Batcave.
I mean, Jim Lee's Batcave is so good.
But what's hilarious is I love how whenever anyone draws the Batcave, no matter what like stage Batman is, if he's like year 1, year 2, whatever, he always has like 8 Batmobiles from like all the past. I get what you're doing. I get you're paying homage. But story-wise, why does like a Batman that just started off have like 80 Batmobiles?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a rich billionaire, might as well, right? But I can agree with your point. It's like, why does he have this many? Doesn't make any sense.
I will say, though, it was pretty dope in Flashpoint Beyond where we see the BVS Batmobile.
Yes, I do.
I was like, yes. Speaking of which, I love how going to Snyder briefly, because you met him, you lucky bastard. I love how like as soon as the true Justice League movie comes out, all the designs for like DC change is like DC changed the Steppenwolf design to look like the Snyder cut. We get this. I'm like, yeah. Oh, Tom King's Batman. We have him in the Nightmare suit. I'm like, this is interesting here.
And then other books too that took inspiration. Yeah, also the other thing that took inspiration from the Nightmare suit was I think it's Tom Taylor and Andy Kubert's Batman Detective that came out last year. One of my favorites from last year. Very much a trench coat, goggles look to him, and it's like, okay, I've seen that before. It's not as gritty, not as many guns, but oh my gosh. Okay, you talk about being jealous.
Hot Toys,
those statues
baby.
make me jealous, man.
Hot toys, baby.
Wish I could.
I got the Golden Iron Man one.
Ooh, nice. That's pretty sick.
Lightest one. As I make jealousy with jealousy, I'll be sure to set. If I ever get to meet Greg Capullo, I'll send you that picture,
dude. And I will just be screaming at the top of my lungs.
Your head will spontaneously combust.
Very much so. Yes.
But so what can you tell us without spoiling it about issue 3 of Savage?
Well, if people like variant covers, we do a variant cover for volume 3, and it's done by a very talented friend of mine. He's known as the Mighty Pegasus. He's the one who won the fan contest for Zack Snyder's Justice League with the Dark Side.
Oh, yeah.
He did this variant cover for volume 3.
Oh, that just looks so good.
Right? And
oh my gosh.
I contacted about this, I think it was like 6 months ago. I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I'm coming out with a new comic. I want to get another artist to do a variant cover, and I really like what you do. Do you think you could pull it off? And at the time, he was like traveling for conventions and such. And he's like, yeah, I want to, like, at the time, I'd absolutely love to. And so a couple months later, he was done with conventions, and he sat down and he was like, what were you thinking about the cover? And Victor has this sort of like, I want to say like Lady Death picture, where it's this lady with like a blackish robe and such, and very similar situation. She's in like a pool of blood and everything. And I was like, why don't you do something like that, but put the character here with the black eyes? I don't know if you can see his eyes right there. They're sort of black with the reflection and everything. And it was like a week later, he came back with this. I was like, dude, you freaking nailed it, man.
And the way the blood like flows off the muscles even. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So variant cover, Victor Koo. It'll be available both on Amazon.com as well as, well, I guess the story will also be available on my website, djwart.net digitally. But physical copies on Amazon. As far as story is concerned, expect a lot of football shots, which I love just because I grew up playing football. My dad was a football coach. I love football. And I actually did a little bit of change as far as like how I do a little bit of backgrounds in this book, because nowadays in a lot of comics you see them use a little bit of those like classic comic dots to kind of give some extra texture in the background. There's some of that in this book, which I think really added a lot to it. Let's see, what else can I really tell you about this?
You mean the Kirby dots?
Not necessarily. Well, I guess there's some. There's some Kirby dots. In fact, here's a good example of one right here. This page has a lot of Kirby dots.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there's that. Trying to think what else I can tell you here. I'll say that it ends with a bang. It ends with a bang, and you kind of get to, you feel bad for Adam a little bit in this issue. Not as bad as you'll feel later on, but you start to kind of feel like the idea of what I said before, of he's really a victim rather than a protagonist. Like, he is the protagonist, but at the end of the day, he's still very much a victim of unfortunate circumstances outside of his control. And you see a lot of that in this book.
So he kind of has a little bit of Bruce Banner in him, a little bit in terms of that being like a victim of circumstance and all that.
Very much so. Yeah. In fact, speaking of covers, here's the regular cover done by myself, yours truly, and it's a wraparound.
Ooh.
So you get a little bit of trees. It's, of course, the plains of South Dakota as he's walking through. Got some telephone lines there, which is really fun. So again, I've loved making this book, but that's basically what I can tell you about volume 3 without spoiling too much.
So with the rest of the episode, I kind of want to tease a little bit our upcoming project. So for those of you that don't know, so I met Dawson because I DM'd him and said, hey, you want to come on the podcast? I liked a lot of his art. So he came on, and then I decided, okay, because I've had this idea, I've had this story in my head for and on paper for like close to 10 years, because because it started off as like a prose novel.
Yeah,
it was a military novel, but the thing is, when I decided to turn into a comic book and Dawson got on the project, is that I was like, so I don't have to worry about making it look authentic. Let's just make it into a superhero thing. And plus, Dawson and I are both huge fans of superhero stuff, so we're like, screw it, let's do it that way. So the title, I know, right? But I got accused for being a Snyder fan and not a comics fan. Just want to let you know. I'm like, if you look at my background.
Oh, I've gotten that same accusation, and yet I have 5 comic boxes down here. I have 3 in that closet right there. I have all these shelves of graphic novels. Again, I showed you my wall of signed things. I mean, that's signed by Keith Williams, Greg Capullo, John Romita Jr., John Romita Jr., John Romita Jr., Scott Snyder, Mark Waid. Yeah. James Tynan, and Greg Horn over there. So, like, come on. I've gotten the same accusation, and it's ridiculous.
But yeah, so Dawson is the one who did this cover, which I'm going to share real quick. He did this, which, again, I always get compliments on this because this looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really fun to do that. I don't usually get to do a whole lot of, like, jewelry or, like metallic sort of outfits, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, I do a lot of like comic book costumes and such, but doing sort of more ornamented, if that's a word, stuff that was really, really fun to do. So I had a blast that on this piece.
Yeah. So, and this is basically a tease for what's to come. By the way, all of the covers, because we're going to do the structure is that it's a graphic novel with chapters, and each chapter is going to have its own unique like cover page. Each cover page is going to be a tribute to a famous DC cover. I just figured that was like the best way to do this.
Yeah.
And that one is actually a tribute to, let me actually share my screen again. That one's a tribute to, I believe this cover is the one that I used for that one. Hang on. Yeah, that Wonder Woman cover.
Yeah, I think it was either that or something very similar to that.
It was
very
that.
Similar concept.
It was a mix of that and this.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then her new suit that she gets, because obviously she gets a new costume. It's a superhero comic. Is going to be inspired by this. By the way, I have this in a graphic novel form signed by David Finch.
Dude, David Finch is another guy that I absolutely love. His Moon Knight.
Oh yeah,
beautiful. Love his Moon Knight.
And another example of like of an artist having good art in a bad book is it Ultimatum.
Yeah.
This is going to be an inspiration for one of the covers, obviously.
Nice.
Because of the way the story goes. But yeah, so a lot of it is going to be inspired by like classic superhero stories.
Sweet.
And the stuff that you and I no doubt have shared. And a lot of it's inspired by Zack Snyder. I'm just going to tell you that right now, as is most of the stuff in this room.
Which, I mean, if you're inspired by a creator, might as well be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And the title is now going to be Athena, Goddess of Thunder. Yes, that's intentional. Volume 1 Perceptions. Each volume is going to have a little theme. It's getting the overall story is going to be like 3 volumes, I figured, and then we could do like in between each volume release, we could do like other fun projects. Like I have an idea for like we do like an anthology after this one where each of my friends who write and draw comics, even you, can come in and write and draw like the origin for one of the members of my Justice League.
Yeah, that's really cool. Just be able to expand the story a little bit. It's
exactly because my plan this going forward is going to be like a big sprawl. My plan is to make another DC universe, except one that doesn't have the problems of the current DC universe.
Which there are many.
There are many. There are many. But yeah, it's super fun, and yeah, I'm super happy to have Dawson on board for the project.
Yeah, I'm happy to be aboard, man. When you first approached me about this, like all the comics that I've done have been my own, right? My own with people like family that I've written the stories and such. So to be able to do like another comic or another story that's written by somebody else to kind of get their perspective on storytelling, it's a very fun experience to be able to have, and I'm very excited for the opportunity.
Plus, it's really easy for me to like describe stuff in the script because we've seen the same movies and read the same comics. So it's like I can just say, okay, it's basically like the Jor-El lab from Man of Steel because you know more or less what that looks like. It's not like I'm working with someone who hasn't watched the same stuff I have. So it's
right,
like, so much better, so much easier.
Just makes communication that much easier.
Mm-hmm. And the way it works is that we're gonna do the Indiegogo campaign, but it's gonna be like launch when we're almost done with the book, so there's less time from done to launch campaign as fast. So my plan is to get this to people as fast as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, which is what you want to do. You won't want to keep people waiting.
And then once again, we'll be pretty soon we'll be releasing art and stuff after February on like some character designs and like teasing the story and stuff. I've seen a lot of because Dawson has sent me some pencils for like the first page. It looks great. It looks dope. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to dive headfirst into this. Again, we have a convention here in February where we're launching Savage 3 and then be able to like dive into Athena. It's going to be very, very nice. Very, I just like to keep myself busy. And the fact that I already have a project right after this is like, there we go. Nice. Keeping it going.
Now, before we conclude, there's one other thing I want to talk about is what comics are we reading? So, Dawson, what comics are you reading? Are you enjoying?
Oh, man. I'm really behind on my comic stack right now.
Me too.
Right now, I'm rereading Daredevil, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.
I have that on my shelf. I love that thing.
Yeah, and obviously the covers, the foil covers.
Yes.
Beautiful. I love them so much. But I guess I can kind of show you what things are going through. Obviously, I'm reading through Ronin Book 2 from Frank Miller, from Frank Miller Productions, which they're coming out with a second issue in February. But I recently picked up Wolverine from Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. Very excited to read through that. Reading Batman Beyond the White Knight. Sean Murphy.
I've heard that's good.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, Sean Murphy, he's an artist that makes his work look both clean and messy at the same time.
Yeah.
And whenever people pull that off, it's just like, yes.
I also love because I read White Knight. He actually references each Batmobile to like, that's where we gave her the tumbler. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
He does that a lot.
Because he's a car head. So it makes sense that he puts so much emphasis on the Batmobiles.
Well, he's just great at paying homage in general. He does like different page tributes, different gadgets. Like there's one room in White Knight that the Joker has that's just filled with all these different references, to either Batman the Animated Series or other Batman films and video games and such. Of course, I'm reading the Mandalorian comic book version.
I love that. They did a great job adapting that.
They really have, and it's been really cool. Obviously, Batman and the Joker Deadly Duo. Like this is the Jim Lee, Scott Williams cover.
Nice.
It's just beautiful. Riddler, Year One from Paul Dano.
That's actually really good.
It is really good. I'm loving it. I just started picking up these Alex Ross covers for the Fantastic Four, which obviously I got to get his like full-on book for it. I'm also reading the controversial Amazing Spider-Man run of Wells. And of course, I'm also picking up just because my man John Romita Jr. is on it, you know, and he's doing all these different covers. In fact, he did a tribute to his dad's very popular Spider-Man No More cover,
Okay.
which is just really awesome. So I'm reading that. Obviously, Action Comics, trying to keep up on that. I picked up recently Frank Miller Presents Ancient Enemies. It's not written by Frank Miller, but it's from his production company. And I just love the Frank Miller Productions logo in the back. It's super slick. I'm reading this alongside Ronin Book 2. And of course, I mentioned, I think before the show, I'd gotten a slab of Frank Miller's Ronin Book 1, issue number 1.
In high grade.
Yeah, 8.5, which thanks my friend Sean for helping me get that. World's Finest, Mark Waid and Dan Mora.
Dan Mora's art is like, oh my gosh.
In fact, on the back here,
I think your camera froze. Oh, there you go. Oh,
right. Look at that. It's a 25% off 1/4 scale collectibles. Wow. I might have to consider that because that's just freaking awesome.
I'm considering that too because that Dark Side statue.
If you somehow end up getting multiples of them, you know who to send it to. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, of course.
And...
or I'll just have them. Dark Side and his brother Chad.
I would kill you. But I'm also reading all the Batman One Bad Day stories. This week I picked up Bane. Haven't been able to read it yet, but of course I also had to get the Jim Lee cover just because it's freaking Jim Lee.
It's Jim Lee. That's all I gotta say.
But I'm also currently reading through the Sandman Omnibus Volume 1, like leather-bound book.
Oh wow!
Which I don't know if you've seen that leather-bound book. Like, okay, you see the stack? It's a thick stack, right? The leather-bound book is almost 3 times as thick as this.
My gosh.
It's a freaking Bible. Like, you think of ancient Bibles that are just like 10 pounds. That's what this is. And I'm reading through that, and I'm like halfway through, and I've been reading it for like over a month.
Speaking of ancient Bibles, I got this.
Oh, yes.
Yes. The best run for Venom of all time.
I have yet to read it, honestly, but I've heard so many great things. It's because the character Null, right? Or is it Null?
Yeah, that's Null. That's Null.
Yeah.
That's the one where he where Venom combines Mjolnir and the Silver Surfer's board into a giant axe and like beats the crap out of Null. I'm like, yes,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I read Superman for Tomorrow with art by Jim Lee and Brian Azzarello.
Yep, I have the Absolute Edition up there on my shelf.
I also have his autograph on one of my Wonder Woman books. There was like one con where it was him, David Finch, and Chris Claremont in one spot. So I was like, let's go.
Did I show you that I have when Wildcats came out, Jim Lee's Wildcats from Image Comics, they had this promotional campaign with a bunch of like promo art for the characters and such. They had this whole folder with like a custom Wildcat sticker.
That.
Yeah, I have a signed, I think, Ravager by Jim Lee. So I have it in my box in my closet over there.
And that's my signed Jim Lee poster.
Nice.
He wasn't there, but at least still gave out the posters. And
yeah.
I've been I got Warworld Rising from my LCS, so I started reading through the Warworld saga. I started reading through a lot of like the Justice League Infinity comics, which is basically the comic sequel to the old cartoon.
Right.
And I actually started John Byrne's Man of Steel series.
Yeah, I got the volume 1 hardcover, but I recently picked up all 6, like 2 through 5, or 2 through 6 actually, and then I found the special edition issue number 1 with the big like chest reveal. I really do like that run. It's definitely more cheesy. In fact, in that volume 1, it's not in the first 6 issues. There is a straight up reference to Monty Python, the Holy Grail. Because there's an issue where Superman encounters the Etrigan, and basically has to like go back in time and stop something from happening in this one artifact from getting released. And so Superman goes back in time to like basically medieval times, and which doesn't really make any sense just because I don't know why Metropolis would be around at that time, because it wouldn't. But anyway, they go up to these 2 peasants, and they're talking to him, asking about where to find this one person. And as they're leaving, of course, Superman's in his blue and red costume and everything. The peasants are like, "Who is that? I don't know. Must be a king. Why do you say that? He hasn't got crap all over him." straight up ripped off of Monty Python. And I just died laughing when I read that.
What's kind of funny about Man of Steel is that that's another series where people are like, I hate Zack Snyder's Superman, but my favorite Superman is Man of Steel. I'm like, that's pretty much the same thing.
It's very, very similar. I mean, there's so many references to it. Like you see Kelex, the artificial intelligence on Krypton. You see the way they handle a lot of his upbringing is very similar, of course, modernized and slightly darker, but very much in the same vein. Yeah, it's just funny. People.
The only thing that I still don't like is those damn trunks. I just think they're so stupid looking.
They're definitely a little outdated. I mean, they can have their place. The only place that they kind of work is in comics. For me.
Yeah, that's why I see people on Twitter wanting that in the movie Superman suit. I'm like, no, the minute you do that, because people think, but because comic book fans think that just because it works in the comics, it'll work in the movies as well. And I'm like, no.
Right. It doesn't always translate. Sometimes it does, but there's a lot of times where it just doesn't work out just because, again, on a comic book page, you could have Superman in trunks and you're focused on like the depiction of the art and everything. And it looks great. But as soon as you put it in live action, it just doesn't translate as well, in my personal opinion.
It would translate better, I think, if you didn't have a belt, because the belt is what like broadcast these are trunks instead of like just a red spot on the costume to break up the color, or just a red belt like they did in the New 52. That's why I love the New 52 Superman. One of the many different reasons why I love that, but. It's just, and even Zach said that when they were making the Man of Steel suit, they had a version that has the like concept that has the trunks. It just looks stupid.
Yeah, it just wasn't working, so they had to go with something that worked more for modern audiences. And let's be honest, the Superman trunk design was based off of the strongmen competitions back in the 40s and 50s, or the 30s. Yeah, that isn't a thing, and it's very much an outdated concept. So it's like, well, if it's outdated for the reason that was inspired, then it's kind of outdated as far as adapting into live action. It just doesn't fit into the modern world.
Yeah, it just doesn't. So another thing I've started reading, I don't know if I told you this, but I started reading the Matrix comics.
Oh yeah, who published those?
I think it was, hang on. It just says Burly Man.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And yes, I have the hardcover.
Oh, of course you have to. I've seen that around, and I've been meaning to pull a trigger at some point, but
it's really cool.
Is it just a recreation of the movies, or is it like an expansion of the lore?
It's expansion on the lore.
Nice.
And I've also been reading, which I've very much been enjoying, is TMNT Last Ronin. That is fantastic.
I keep seeing hardcovers of it at stores, and I keep talking myself out of it, even though I really want to read the story. Gosh, and I've read.
If you like Dark Knight Returns, it's that, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I have issues 2 through 5, but I wasn't able to get the first one because I was late to get to it because I didn't realize it was coming out. And by the time I knew it was issue 1, I couldn't find anywhere. So I've been meaning to read that, and I know the story, I know the basic idea of it, and it just sounds so amazing.
Fun fact, speaking of TMNT, I have a variant cover for Dark Knight 3 The Master Race, drawn and signed by Kevin Eastman.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I figured I'd rub that in because you and I have a shared love of Dark Knight 3 The Master Race.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to collect all of the both colored and black and white Greg Capullo covers that he did for that run, just because, obviously. And that's one of my favorite books of all time.
And then I actually started reading a little bit of the Marv Wolfman Deathstroke run.
Yeah.
Because he is one of my favorite characters of all time in DC's. He and Darkseid are my favorite supervillains. Just when you have like a super assassin that just basically just does whatever the hell he wants. It's like, it's so cool.
Yeah, also the fact that he has like, the sort of healing factor. He is incredibly skilled. One of the few people that can, like, martial arts wise, go toe to toe with Batman and actually pose a threat. And
he's up against Superman.
Yeah. He's gone up against a bunch of different people, and he's one of those, like, he can be a good ally at moments, but you never know when he's going to turn his back on you. Like, you just never know.
Wasn't he on the Justice League at some point?
I think I know what you're referencing. I think he like partnered with them briefly. I know that he, in a recent story, Deathstroke Incorporated, he was framed for murdering Ra's al Ghul, and so like he's trying to figure out who framed him, and Batman's trying to figure out who killed him at the same time, and like they're their goal is kind of aligned, but they're still like enemies.
But here's the thing, though, with Ra's al Ghul, do you really care? Because you just put him in the Lazarus pit, he's fine.
Well, yeah, but I think in the story, I read issue 1. I think it was illustrated by Victor Bogdanovich, so I just had to get it. And I think they said he like destroyed Lazarus pits or something, and he was like changing his ways. They're gonna have some twist where he's still alive, and he set up the whole thing to create contention, destroy like all these different things. Like
Because
it's how
DC.
it goes. It's how it goes. No one ever stays dead.
Yeah, that's another issue with comics, is that no one ever, because I know when the Justice League died, they didn't actually die, they were just teleported to another planet, but I'm like, they're going to come back, and then DC actually confirmed they're going to come back, and I love the collective internet response. Really? You mean that you're not going to kill your main, you're not going to kill the character, you mean you're not going to actually kill the characters that actually sell books?
Right. And making big stunts like that, it doesn't really work for people because, again, like you said, at the end of the day, they know like they're coming back. Like
that's why also it doesn't work when you have like John Kent as Superman, because we know Clark's going to come back. And plus, here's the thing. I'm against having multiple characters have the same mantle, because it gets into the thing like, okay, I want to read Superman. Which one? What?
It's like the same thing. I was having a good conversation with a friend of mine at the comic book shop yesterday. And we were talking about Spider-Man. And, you have, Ben, who's known as Scarlet Spider, right? Then Spider-Gwen has recently become like Ghost Spider, right?
Which is great.
Which is a great name. But yet Miles Morales is still just Miles Morales Spider-Man. He needs a unique name.
They tried to give him like Kid Arachnid, but that just doesn't work.
That's a dumb name. That's a terrible name.
Who thought of that?
Kid Arachnid? Like,
who thought of that? Shadow Spider would be will be better because he cloaks.
Yeah, Shadow Spider. That's a great name. It's a fantastic name.
Marvel, hire me. I'll fix your entire X-Men office as well. Jeez.
I mean, because it's exhausting every time. Like you read it, the comic says Miles Morales Spider-Man. It's like it's at that point he's just like a knockoff. Make him have a specific name.
They have Steve and Sam both being Captain America in the comics right now. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, it just kind of takes away from the name. You got to have one or the other. Like either have like Steve be dead and have Bucky take over as Captain America, or Sam, whichever one you want to do. Even though Sam, as a character of Falcon, is already really cool. Like he stands alone on his own. I don't know.
That's why I think with the Dawn of the DC, they're doing what I've always said they're going to do. They're not giving John Kent his own series, except for like the Ultraman stuff, but they're going to put him in like the Action Comics anthology series, which I'm like, that's the best way to still tell his stories, but have Clark Kent be the main, because I could go down the street and ask someone, who's Superman? Clark Kent. There you go.
Yeah, and you're not going to change. You're not going to change like 80 years of history of the character.
So they almost did that. Did you see like the 5G files that they almost did for 5G?
No, I don't think I saw that.
They released, okay, so Bleeding Cool apparently got the inside details on what the 5G reboot was going to be. It was going to be a 5-year stint where Clark Kent's retired and John Kent is Superman, and then even Comic Historian was like, yeah, this would have destroyed comics.
Yeah, it wouldn't have worked out well. I mean, no.
I wonder why Dan DiDio was fired for even suggesting that. I'm like, yeah, dude.
It would not have gone over well.
No.
Not at all.
But so I think that's a good place to leave it. Dawson, it was a pleasure having you back on the show, and he'll be on more as we do, like as we get into our project a lot. So we'll be having a whole lot of fun on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always great to be on here, man. Always great to talk to you about comics and nerd out for a little bit. It's always a fun time. And I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, man.
All right, and stay work, everyone. Oh, so Dawson, where can we find Savage Volume 3?
Well, you can find Savage Volume 3 on February 11th on Amazon.com, as well as on my website digitally at djwart.net. Once again, here is the cover for Savage Volume 3. All the other books as well, Volumes 1 and 2, are on Amazon.com and DJW Art. I'm going to have a bundle package on the website for all 3 volumes digitally with a little bit of a discount. So if people are interested in that, they can check that out. And also on djwart.net, we got plenty of awesome prints. In fact, I have some prints laid out down here for our convention
Yeah,
this next
I've
month.
seen them and they are like freaking dope.
I'll show you one. You mentioned me drawing blood. I'll show you one here. Because of good old God of War.
Holy!
Yeah, so that's one I'm expecting to be a good sell at the convention this next month. But stuff like this and other superheroes and other characters on my website. Again, that's djwart.net. And we got lots of fun stuff there. So very, very exciting.
Looks dope. And maybe we'll see some prints of my characters pretty soon. We'll see that.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
So stay heroic, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.